More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Follow the leader. KBLA Talk 1580. Follow the leader.
If you're not following KBLA Talk 1580 on all of our socials, then you're missing out. Download our app and find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and on the web at KBLA 1580.
That's right.
Again, you can find all of our socials at KBLA 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
By the way, if you miss any of our weekday shows in real time, you can always catch up by checking out the podcast of your favorite shows at your leisure. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
Follow the leader. Following the leader. Oh my God. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
You're listening to The Black Pack. I'm Mano Achanga, sitting in for Adrianne Shropshire, who is on the ground at the State of the People Power Tour. And you can still get over there in time for the 7 p.m. rally happening this evening. But up first, we're going to be revisiting a really great conversation that Adrianne with Kevin Cosney, Associate Director and Co-founder of the California Black Power Network, followed by Rukia Lumumba, Director of the Movement for Black Lives Electoral Justice Project. Rounding out the hour is Dr. Melina Abdullah, the co-founder and director of Black Lives Matter Grassroots.
Kevin, talk to us a little bit about why you felt like it was important for the California Black Power Network to be engaged in this kind of national effort that's also helping to bring folks together on the local level.
Yeah, absolutely, Adrian. And again, shout out to Social Justice Learning Institute and Leaders Up and Black Pack, right, for really helping lead the charge on this thing. You know, we're at a critical juncture as Black Americans, as Black Californians, and as Black Angelenos. Mm-hmm. And there's this narrative that we are disengaging or should be disengaged, and I think that's false and dangerous, right? Mm-hmm. We see this event as not the end of a tour, but really an entry point for so many of our communities to join into the long legacy of work to create a more just LA, a more just California, and a more just country. And Black folks have always been at the forefront of that fight and will continue to be at the forefront of that fight. We know we are always most endangered when we see regimes like this current Trump administration, and also, right, disasters like the wildfires that spread throughout Southern California. So it's always imperative for us to be engaged, and we are engaged. So again, we don't see this as the end of this tour, but really a beginning point for many of our communities to join in to the work that members of our organization, right, California Black Power Network, have been doing for decades, and will continue to do after this event.
Kevin, I want to ask you to talk a little bit about the California Black Power Network and the work that you all do every day with your partner organizations to organize and mobilize and advocate on behalf of Black communities across the state.
Absolutely. I appreciate that question. The California Black Power Network is a coalition of 46 Black-led and serving grassroots community organizations across the state of California and in 13 counties across the state. And we've come together really to impact and improve the lived conditions of Black folks. We engage, day in, day out throughout the year in community organizing and base building work, narrative communications and arts and culture work to bring our folks together and shift consciousness and understanding of the world around us. And voter and civic engagement to make sure that our folks are civically engaged in the process that actually creates and the laws that we live by, and policy development, advocacy, and direct action, right, to make sure that we can actually create some systems change to better shape the world that we live in. So what that looks like is just a couple of weeks ago, we had 100 Black leaders across the state, community members, right, up in the state Capitol, right, talking about our policy priorities to make sure that our folks have access to housing, to make sure that the legislature is moving on reparations, right, which has been a big conversation in this state.
Can you talk a little bit about the reparations work that you all have been working on?
Absolutely. We've been certainly contributing to the chorus of voices, right, that have been calling for repair in our communities. Folks may know that the California approved a task force to explore both what are the harms that have been done to Black Californians and what could repair look like. That task force wrapped up its work in 2023, but California Black Power Network was one of a handful of organizations that were engaged in the community engagement portion of that. We held 10 listening sessions across the state of California to engage 300 Black folks, right, in the questions of what have the harms been, what does repair look like, and even, how do we think about eligibility? Some really important questions that really helped shape the task force report that led to hundreds of recommendations and has since then been really launching a broader coalition across the state of California that includes a number of the task force members, a number of organizations like Black Equity Collective, Talos California, Live Free, and numerous other array of multiracial organizations that are all in support and solidarity and taking action around reparations for Black Californians and have been engaging the California Black Caucus and the legislature at large to make sure that those recommendations from the task force are turning into policy.
So I appreciate that, because I think that sometimes it's because there's so much going on, right, in the world, in this country, and in people's lives. Sometimes it's easy to lose track of what happens to important policy conversations, right? And so I think that it's important for people to know that the conversation around reparations in the state is not over, right? Like it wasn't a single moment, right? And then kind of went away, right? And so I feel like it's important, and I appreciate the work that you all continue to do around it, but it's important for folks to recognize that this is still an ongoing effort to get those recommendations implemented. Is that right?
Absolutely, right. And I think it's important to know, right? I think oftentimes when folks hear reparations, they think 40 acres and a mule or a check, right? But it's important to
a bag of cash,
framework.
a bag of cash on my doorstep is what I'm looking for.
Right. Which, that end, right? And I think it's important for us to have an expanded understanding what reparations is. In order to really gain the repair that we deserve, right? So at the international level, it is certainly compensation, but also includes restitution, rehabilitation, satisfaction, and what I think is one of the most important pieces is guarantees of non-repetition and cessation of harm, right? So you can't say you're making up for the harms of slavery while slavery is still in our state and federal constitution, right? So there is you have to stop the harm before you start apologizing and repairing the harm. But it's expansive, right? And so there are, again, over 300 recommendations that the task force came up with to address repair. And it's also important to note that reparations is about human rights violations. So those violations started with slavery, but certainly did not end. And we know there's an unbroken chain from periods of enslavement up until today, whether we talk about 13th Amendment slavery or we talk about eminent domain or redlining and, so many of the harms. And so we are moving on all of those fronts, and it's important for us to stay engaged. The energy in 2020 that helped make the task force a reality, where folks were in the streets, is a type of energy that we'll need to continue to make progress and turn these recommendations into policy.
Yeah, I appreciate that because it is both important, again, that people know that this is an ongoing fight and there are places for them to plug in, right? But people are still out there advocating, and this is the kinds of topics that will be discussed at the State of the People Power Tour.
You're part of the Black Pack with Adrianne Shropshire on KBLA Talk 1580.
Time is up. The IRS is in full collection mode for 2025, issuing liens, levies, and garnishments to anyone who has a past tax debt or unfiled tax returns. Don't wait till it's too late. Your paycheck and bank accounts are at risk of being seized. Call now and stop the collection process today. If you're living check to check, no matter how much you're making, you still may qualify for the Fresh Start programs offered by the IRS to reduce or even eliminate your tax debt. It's just a 5-minute call to get your options, and it's free. If you owe back taxes, have years of unfiled tax returns, under audit, have a wage or bank levy, or finally just want to sleep better, business or personal, call the experts at Republic Tax Relief while there's still time. A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau, and tough. This veteran-owned company has the fight you need to take on the IRS. Don't go at it alone. The call is free. Call their hotline number now, 800-259-4546. That's 800-259-4546. Find out if you qualify today. Call 800-259-4546 or go to republictaxrelief.com.
We are anti-racist, anti-hate, and anti-stupid stuff. Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 is committed to self-care and community well-being. Walk Good LA was formed in June 2020, inspired by the Black Lives Matter movement and the beginning stages of the COVID-19 pandemic. What began as a few minutes of breath work and yoga meditation before protests against police brutality turned into a safe space for the community to heal in hard times. The immensely positive response from the community transformed the momentum into a movement. Today, Walk Good LA is a Black and Brown-led community wellness organization based in Los Angeles. They provide spaces for healing through community yoga classes, guided meditations, hikes, run clubs, and other activations throughout Los Angeles that attract hundreds of members weekly. With the help of Propel and Michael B. Jordan, they now have a yoga and wellness studio in Los Angeles called the Walk Good Yard. To join their mailing list and connect with healing spaces, please visit walkgoodla.org. That's walkgoodla.org. Or find them on Instagram at walkgoodla. This is a community call to action, a community call to healing from KBLA Talk 1580.
Let's get back to more of the Black Pack with Adrianne Shropshire right now on KBLA Talk 1580.
You are listening to the Black Pack. I'm your host, Adrianne Shropshire, here at KBLA Talk 1580, and I am so pleased to be welcoming to the Black Pack Rukia Lumumba, Director of the Electoral Justice Project for the Movement for Black Lives. Welcome, Rukia.
Thank you. Thank you. It is so great to be on. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
No, I'm glad you're here. There are few people, I think, that I am happy to be in conversation with you about what is a hard topic. This weekend marks the 5th anniversary of George Floyd's murder by Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin. And in the aftermath of that tragedy, the nation sort of began to characterize what was happening and sort of characterize itself as being in the midst of a racial reckoning, right? Presumably meaning that America was attempting to deal with its never-ending inability to address its racist past or present. And we saw everything from corporations attempting to address systemic racism inside their own institutions. We saw Congress attempt to pass national police accountability legislation. Minneapolis voters had a ballot initiative to overhaul public safety and policing. So 5 years ago, there was this terrible tragedy, and then there was this sort of shaking, right? The largest protests ever seen, right, in the country. When we think about 5 years ago, did it feel for you and for Movement for Black Lives, did it feel like in the shadow of this tragedy that there might be some progress that was possible?
I think it's such a good question, right? Such a good question, because when we're in it, right, when mourning the loss, when we are in our spaces of just rage and anger, which often pushes us to move and to push for greater policy and greater changes, I think it is our anger, but it is our faith,
right,
that keeps us pushing for the change that we demand, this demand for justice. And so I would say that we don't do this work unless we believe that it's going to happen.
Right.
Right. Now, and I think that in 2020, the 2020 uprisings, it just wasn't fueled by the horrific murder of George Floyd.
Right.
But the deaths of Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and the onslaught of people who died during COVID-19 is fueled by the many unknown people killed by police violence and state violence in Mississippi and so many other places across this nation. And we have been working against police violence and state violence for years, right? MPBL, the Movement for Black Lives, which is a coalition of organizations, of over 150 organizations that come together to debate, to strategize, and to demand change, was birthed out of the uprisings of Ferguson after the death of Mike Brown, right? We honor Mike Brown's life and his family. I was just on a call with this brother Marquel Bridges out of Mississippi, who holds monthly or bi-weekly calls with families across the nation who have been impacted affected by police violence, right? So from Samira Rice's mother, right? Remember, we were fighting that, right? All the way to was on the call. So that's Cleveland, Ohio, all the way to Jackson, Mississippi, right? We have Arkila Lewis, whose son Jalen Lewis was killed by this new road police force called police, state police in Jackson. So, you know, I venture to say that it's not just my own thinking, but it is our thinking as people who care about the lives of Black people and believe that it should never be normal for us to be fighting for people to be safe from police violence and police murder. This should not be something that is regular, that we do it and we uprise and we make change and we push for policy because we believe that it can happen. It's because of what we accomplished that we have such this strong opposition and literally dismantling of everything we were able to accomplish intentionally. And so, you know, I really point people to the report, Interrupting Criminalization, which gives a real great detailed understanding of what the defund movement or the invest divest movement was able to achieve in 2020, leading all the way up until now. You know, we won over $840 million in direct cuts from police departments across the nation. More than 20 major cities reduced their police budgets in some form. From Minneapolis to Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, New York, Denver, Baltimore, Boston, Salt Lake City, Milwaukee, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Oakland, Berkeley. I mean, we could just go to Austin. You know, people talk about the South, but Austin, Texas, Durham, North Carolina, Chicago. I mean, it's a long list. It's 20 cities, y'all. You know, so we were able, Washington, D.C. I mean, it's a lot of places. Where we were able to see an investment in community, right? Because we didn't even talk about, as they were defunded from these police departments, places like Newark, New Jersey, during the 2020 year had no police shootings, period.
Right.
Newark, New Jersey, right?
Right.
2020, no police shootings, period. Right?
Yeah.
You look at places across the nation, you saw offices of violence intervention and violence prevention and trauma recovery building coming up and as alternatives to expanding their police departments, right? You saw the federal government invest in these offices of alternatives, right? And these community-based and community-led alternatives to calling the police and community-based alternatives to violence intervention, right? Of decreasing violence. We saw that happen.
Yeah.
We saw so much happening. We saw people being very clear, right? Over 80% of Black people were very clear that they wanted money to be spent on investments in their communities instead of in investing in police departments that consistently criminalize our folks. And so, you know, we saw people asking about the divestment from police departments and putting part of their budget towards investment in healthcare, in education, in housing. And look at where we are now, where those exact things, education, housing, healthcare, are now being attacked because we began to invest in them,
and
right?
also
At a different rate than we have been before.
But also the community safety, right? Like, are also being divested. Right. And those were, as you said, so important in terms of decreasing violence in our neighborhoods, decreasing violence in our communities, which is a thing that people always say, right? You know, what they want, they say they want alternatives, right? Some of that alternatives are community safety, you know, violence intervention. And then some of it are the things you say that you talked about, like investments in education, so opportunity investments, right? To give young people you know, a hope for what is possible for themselves and their community and their futures.
That's right. That's right. Really investing in our welfare, our well-being, and not in our incarceration and our criminalization. And so as we're seeing all of this being dismantled and not being able to reach the scale, because let's be clear, we started in 2020, but we still had not reached the scale of change and transformation that we needed and is necessary, right, for us to feel the difference. We now are in a place where even our short-term gains are being, you know, just ripped from us. And so what we're trying to do as M4BL is that we're trying to ensure that we are, one, reminding people of what we have been able to build, right? But then two, helping people remember our own self-determination and how we take care of ourselves in a period of time that we have been at before, where we could not rely on our federal government,
Right.
where we could not rely on our state entities to defend or protect our people. And so what does it look like? Really began to invest back into our communities as those safe havens. So we had, for example, last year, a People's Response Campaign, where 20 organizations from across the nation, from 20 different cities across the nation, stood up or expanded their mental health response programs as an alternative to calling the police.
Right.
Most of these programs weren't getting any type of state, city, or federal dollars, but they were standing up these safety institutions in their communities as alternatives and really making change. We asked those organizations to push for resolutions within their county or in their cities or within their states for the adoption of the city, the state, or the county to invest in these as longer term solutions, right, that are funded in the state. And so while we can't depend on the federal government, we're looking at a hyper local level. How are we able to, as community, as Black community, take care of ourselves, right? One way is standing up the programs that we deserve, right? And doing that work.
What are M4BL partners doing right now to make sure that our people understand what's happening, that they have accurate information, right? Because we can already see the ways in which disinformation will seep into people's social media feed, to make sure that they understand that we are not without power, right? That we still have power to make a change. And so how are we conveying that to folks? How are we making sure that we're keeping people engaged and involved? And you were on a roll about some of those things, right? Showing up, particularly in our local communities, which I think is critically important right now for us to be organizing and making sure that we're getting as much as we can out of our local and state elected officials and bodies. But I'm gonna let you continue down because you were laying stuff out so well, and then I paused you. But that does feel like the important thing right now is to make sure we're keeping folks informed, that we're keeping folks engaged, and that we're showing people that there are opportunities to continue to make change.
Yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely. Thank you for coming back to that. What we feel is a critical component of what we must in this time of great uncertainty, in this time of just what feels like a constant slew of attacks, both politically, but also we're experiencing these attacks climate-wise, right? Places like Jackson without clean water still, right? Like Flint without clean water still, right? Places people experiencing hurricanes and having to deal with hurricanes and tornadoes. We're talking about St. Louis right now, while also the federal government defunding aid and rapid response opportunities. The federal government defunding healthcare initiatives and education initiatives that really help and take care of our children. Constantly, we're hearing about even summer feeding programs being cut in places, and how that's going to impact ourselves. So as all of this is happening, we believe that it is critical to create space for us to come together as mass body of people to really be informed, right? To not only be informed, but also to vet information, to share and vet information, and then to make some critical decisions together, right? Let's make some decisions together, some solutions, right? Build on some solutions together, right? Take care of each other, right? How are we doing that? And so one of the ways and one of the spaces that we're able to do that is through this assembly process called the People's Assemblies or the People Movement Assemblies. And so we are standing up in partnership with many organizations, including our multiracial formation called the Rising Majority, but also through our partnerships with member organizations of M4BL, like the Jackson People's Assembly process, the Malcolm X grassroots movement, and other organizations, Black Voters Matter, that has really been believing in this assembly process for a long time. Standing up assembly process and opportunities for people to engage in this process as a space to come together to engage in what we call co-governance, right? And what does that mean? That means these are spaces where everyday regular folks, we're coming together to talk about those critical issues that are facing our communities, but more importantly, we're taking the time to build the solutions together. And so these are spaces where we're going to be engaging in political education. These are spaces where we engage in political education. These are spaces where we're talking about civic understanding. Yes, we go to vote. Many of us go to vote. Some of us don't, right? But oftentimes we go on to vote and we don't even fully understand what the position does, right? So we have to, it is a deep belief that the more informed we are, right, the more informed that we build our communities, the more knowledge that our communities have, the better decisions we're able to make, right? We believe our people are smart enough to make the decisions when they got the information. The information. We got to create the space to have the information. We want to also really increase our base, like increase the number of people that we're connecting with. And that not only are they getting information on social media, but that they're getting information in a loving, respectable space where they are free to say the wrong thing, but also correct it in the most loving way. Right.
I think we talk about all the time here that we have to give people grace, like this assumption that everybody knows everything, and that, or that everyone has to agree on everything. And that if people don't know or people disagree, then we just jump all over people, right? Instead of actually being, to the word that you just used is helpful, respectful, but also just to give people grace. Because I think that the opposite of the thing that you said, that people show up to vote and don't really know what the thing is they're voting on. The opposite of that is that people don't show up to vote because they don't understand what difference it's going to make, right? And I feel like that's the point where we don't give people grace, right? Where people say, I'm not going to vote because I don't know what any of this is. And then we jump all over them instead of explaining, right?
That's right.
What it is.
That's right. That's right. And we're using these spaces, these people's assemblies or people movement assemblies, as some people say it, as spaces also to really begin to listen. Oftentimes, we sometimes think we're the smartest people in the room as advocates or organizers, right? We need to stop and listen, right? And so listening and understanding what are the priority issues that our folks are saying are hitting them right now.
More of the Black Pack with Adrianne Shropshire on KBLA Talk 1580 when we come forward.
I'm Amber Payton with BIN News Now. Black House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries is vowing to expose ICE agents involved in recent raids despite warnings from officials about rising threats.
Officials at the Department of Homeland Security, including ICE, should be held to the same standards as every other part of law enforcement.
Jeffries calls the raids aggressive overreach and says agents hiding their identities will still be identified. Black New Orleans Mayor LaToya Cantrell is in France for a United Nations climate summit days after attending another in Canada. Critics are slamming her frequent travel as investigations continue into a recent jailbreak and holiday power outage. And Michelle Obama says she supports her daughter Malia's decision to drop the Obama last name in her film work. Malia used Malia Ann for her directorial debut, The Heart. Get BIN News Now on demand 24/7 on the iHeartRadio app.
Think It Up is an initiative to activate student-powered, teacher-led learning projects. Students and teachers, how can you spark great learning experiences in your classrooms today? Join at thinkitup.org.
Is this the time? This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
There is NIL money in women's college softball. Texas Tech pitcher Najari Kennedy was the first softball player to sign a $1 million NIL deal 2 years ago when she was at Stanford. Friday morning, the African-American star from Topeka, Kansas, signed another $1 million NIL deal, confirming her intentions to stay at Texas Tech for her senior season next year. Kennedy has become the face of women's college softball. She's a two-time NCAA Player of the Year and a three-time first-team All-American. Kennedy will be pitching tonight for Texas Tech against Texas in the championship game in Oklahoma City. Tomorrow night at 7 here on KBLA. Join me and my co-host Neil Scarborough for Out of Bounds. 60 minutes of sports chatter with some flavor. We'll preview Game 2 of the NBA Finals and recap Coco Gauff's performance Saturday morning in the French Open Tennis Championship. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Follow the leader. KBLA Talk 1580. Follow the leader.
If you're not following KBLA Talk 1580 on all of our socials, then you're missing out. Download our app and find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and on the web at KBLA 1580.
That's right.
Again, you can find all of our socials at KBLA 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
By the way, if you miss any of our weekday shows in real time, you can always catch up by checking out the podcast of your favorite shows at your leisure. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
Follow the leader. Following the leader.
Oh my God.
Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader. Follow the leader.
Where else can you get breaking news, weather, traffic, and an unapologetically progressive conversation?
Nowhere except right here.
Welcome home, LA. Your new home, KBLA Talk 1580.
Texting enrolls you into reoccurring automated text messages. Consent not required to purchase. Message and data rates may apply.
Hey, Dan, how you doing? Haven't seen you around the gym for a while.
Yeah, I've really fallen off. Since I turned 40, I just don't get the results I used to get.
Could be lower testosterone.
Lower T?
Yeah, I went through it a while back. Once you hit 40, your body has less free testosterone. I got Nugenix Total T, and it's made a huge difference for me.
I've seen that ad on TV. Is it for real?
Oh, yeah. The key ingredient is something called Tesnor, which helps boost free and total testosterone levels to help you trim up and stay lean.
And it's made a difference for you?
Man, I feel like I'm in my 20s again, at work, in the gym, and in the bedroom.
Are they still giving out complimentary bottles for people to try it for themselves?
Yeah, you just need to send them a text.
Text EQUAL to 321-321 right now for your complimentary bottle of Nugenix Total T, the #1 selling testosterone booster at GNC. Plus, text now and we'll include a bottle of Nugenix Thermo, our most powerful fat incinerator ever, to help you get back into shape fast, absolutely free. Text EQUAL to 321-321. That's EQUAL to 321-321.
KBLA Talk 1580.
We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. LA County's new Justice Care and Opportunities Department, or JCOD, is here to support justice-involved individuals and their families. The JCOD Support Center is now taking calls at 1-833-LACJCOD. That's 1-833-522-5263. Available 7 days a week from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m., the Support Center is your one-stop shop for re-entry issues and court support. They offer court reminders, connections to local services, transportation assistance for housing, court appearances, and childcare. The JCOD hotline provides personalized help to connect you with services that you need. And don't forget to check out justiceconnect.org for more information. Remember, it's free and available every day at 1-833-522-5263. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
You're inside the Black Pack with Adrianne Shropshire on KBLA Talk 1580.
You are listening to the Black Pack here on KBLA Talk 1580. Last week, we were having a conversation leading up to the 5th anniversary of George Floyd's murder and the uprisings that followed across the country. And we are continuing that conversation about the ongoing work of grassroots movement organizers in the face of escalating attacks on Black communities. And so I'm so happy to be joined by Dr. Melina Abdullah, co-founder and director of Black Lives Matter Grassroots. Welcome, Melina.
Hi, Adrian. So good to be with you.
I feel like sometimes because I was gone from LA for so long, I actually forget how long we have known each other.
For a long time.
For a long time.
And we haven't been able to be in space together for a while.
I know, for a really long time. We were literally baby organizers.
We were. But I'm glad to be talking to you now.
I know, I am too. So I want to just look back for a second to 5 years ago. I feel like we have been, leading up to the anniversary since this weekend and kind of going forward, doing a lot of reflecting, over just thinking about the context in which the protests and uprisings evolved. And I was talking with Rakila Mumble about the context was, we were already in difficult times, right? We were dealing with COVID. We had already come out of a number of highly publicized police killings. There was other racial violence happening in the country. And then we hit that moment, right? That really resonated across communities, right? Not just across communities in the U.S., but across the globe. And so I just wonder, when you look back at that period of time, and since then, what do you carry forward from that moment when we saw the sort of protests and uprisings and a real call, and I think for some people, like a real sense that we would see transformative change? What do you take away from the last 5 years?
Well, I think that I'm still extremely encouraged by that moment. Mm-hmm. I think that it gave me perspective that Black Lives Matter had already been organizing for 7 years before 2020. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So there was a movement to meet that moment, right? There were organizers on the ground who understood what state-sanctioned violence is. And when it happened, I remember saying to myself and saying to everybody else, this is a moment when the world is cracking wide open. The world is cracked wide open. Mm-hmm. And, I love creativity and fiction. And there was a HBO series out then. And it was about, oh, God, why am I forgetting what the name of the series was? But it was about kind of this moment, like these time travelers, right? Right. And it was grounded in Blackness, and that's what I felt like we were Lovecraft country. I felt like we were actually living Lovecraft country, right? It was Lovecraft country, that there's this moment that the world cracks wide open, and we understand that the murder of George Floyd and the murders leading up to George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor, right, were a moment when you saw this breaking open, but it's not going to stay open forever. Right. So you run through that moment of cracking and you get as much justice as you possibly can before the walls close back in. Right. And I think that we did a lot of that, and it was going to be messy, and we weren't going to be able to gather everything, but we were going to gather as much justice as we could. I think one of the lessons that I'm learning now as somebody who organized for decades, but organized under the banner of Black Lives Matter for, I've been in it since the very beginning. What I'm understanding in this moment is I never foresaw the resources and name recognition and all of that would come 7 years into Black Lives Matter. And what I discounted in that moment is not the call for justice, because I think that we did a phenomenal job pulling people into their own power. But there had to be a stronger infrastructure that had better guardrails to guard against the counter organizing that was happening. And I'm learning that now, and learning that that's something that needs to happen. And we have to build greater capacity by building coalitions where we can, by building trusting coalitions where we can, not thinking we have to do everything ourselves. But I'm extremely proud of the work that we did and encouraged by the work that we did. And I see another crack happening right now, 5 years later, right? Fascism is bringing cracks, and we got to be ready to run through those cracks and beat back fascism and move towards our liberation, really build an abolitionist agenda and build infrastructure that can help us get there. Let me ask you about that, because I do think that we oftentimes underestimate the amount of infrastructure and capacity
required, and we sort of build it, right? Like try and build it in real time. And then the next wave of something happens, right? Which I think is sort of what you're alluding to right now in terms of what we face. But how are the groups in the network sort of meeting this new moment, right? How are folks engaging in community, despite what we're seeing in terms of the retreat, at least at the federal level, and certainly retreat even at the state and local levels? But how are groups in the network using the lessons that they've learned to continue to build and to move forward and create new capacity and new strategies as we face down something that none of us have ever really experienced in our lifetimes. You'd have to go back 100 years really before we could find examples of what we are seeing right now.
Well, I think that we are recognizing what we did well, like the rapid response. We're recognizing how we built that infrastructure. The rapid response infrastructure is there. The idea that budgets are connected, budgets are moral and ethical documents. We got that down. We got down that you can never let up on the police, right? Yeah. We got all of that down. And I think that kind of holding on to that and embracing that and moving that forward is really important. And I think that we're also starting to get that we can't be dismayed that there's now, hundreds of people in the streets, not hundreds of thousands of people in the streets, because pre-2020, there were 4 or 5 people in the streets. Right. Still growth.
Yes.
So remembering that is really important. I was in Minneapolis for the 5-year in George Floyd Square, and people were going, where is everybody? But there were, dozens of folks, and sometimes it would balloon to hundreds of folks. And that's great because there was nobody pre-2020, right? Or very few. Like I'm thinking about the family of Jamar Clark and Philando Castile. They didn't get the kind of response that George Floyd got, right?
Yeah, that's right.
But I think the other thing that's happening, and I'm actually in Indianapolis right now, is I think that you see organizations being willing to say we don't have to do everything exactly the same in order to see each other and in order to build solidarity together. So Indianapolis, there's the Black Radical Organizers Convention is happening here. And so you see Malcolm X grassroots movement. We're here along with the Black Alliance for Peace, which we're not always on the same page, right? But we understand that we all want liberation and we can all work together and learn from each other. And I think that's something that we've learned since 2020, that we don't have to be so ground down into our own belief system and structure that we say now we can't get down with you because we differ a little bit on this one thing because, So I think that that's really, really encouraging.
I have had this conversation with many folks here on the Black Pack Show about this sort of critique that's happening in progressive circles right now about where are the Black folks, right? They need to show up. And it's really, it bothers me for a whole host of reasons. But part of it is because we are always doing things, right? And just because people don't see it, don't know it, aren't participating in it, doesn't mean that somehow, Black people are somewhere, napping all the time. But I see lots of things happening. I see community organizations. I see movement building organizations doing the same work that they always do. It coalescing in moments, whether it's, at the convening where you are, whether it's the convenings that are happening through the State of the People Power Tour, whether it is folks strategizing themselves, like trying to get themselves in order to prepare to face what's in front of us. But I would love your perspective on this idea that somehow if Black folks aren't organizing or mobilizing in the way that the progressive ecosystem demands, that somehow that means we're doing nothing.
Well, I mean, that's also really, really untrue. Just numerically and factually, Black people are the most civically engaged of any group. And that's from everything from voting to organizing, to advocating, to protesting in the streets. It's Black people on the front lines. And we're on the front lines because we have to be on the front lines, right? And so I thought that was probably a right-wing effort. I have a conspiracy realist mind, right? That when they say Black people need to sit this one out, we ain't never sat nothing out.
Ever.
So what are they talking about?
Right.
So we're not. I mean, but even if you think about the solidarity work, who is it who's saying free Palestine? It's Black students, right? Along with other students. But if you look at, my niece is one of the ones who had her degree withheld by Columbia University for doing a teach-in in a library on May 7th, right? My oldest child is co-founder of Students for Justice in Palestine at Howard, right? So it's Black students, right? Black students. Angel Marie Taylor at Cal State Channel Islands, Jabri Lowe at Woodbury University in Burbank, right? These are Black students doing that. It's Black people are the largest group other than, even though there are Black immigrants, but other than non-Black immigrants. It's Black people, non-immigrant Black people who are the second largest group fighting for the rights of migrant communities, right? So miss me with that. Black people aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. Black people have always been on front lines. We should be on front lines, whereas everybody else should be the question.
That part, yeah. I do think it is because it is a continuation of, to your point, we have historical precedent of us always being in the fight. This is one of those things that I feel like things are happening. People are engaged. They're doing the necessary education and disrupting misinformation and doing the sort of training and planning for all of the things that need to be done. But because it isn't in the proper form or in the correct form. This is KBLA Talk 1580. Stay with us.
You're part of the Black Pack with Adrianne Shropshire on KBLA Talk 1580.
The State of the People Power Tour is not a moment, it's a movement. 11 cities, one mission. To organize with care, build with strategy, and remind ourselves that we have never needed saving. This Friday and Saturday, the State of the People Power Tour arrives in LA for its final stop. The State of the People Power Tour is not just a series of stops. It's a signal, a shift, a belief that power lies in the hands of everyday people. A belief that if we show up for each other, our communities will be stronger. Join us this Friday, June 6th in Los Angeles at the Seed School and on Saturday, June 7th at Pasadena City College. We need you in the room to link arms with neighbors and leaders from across the country to build something that will last, because we believe if we move together, we will rise together. For more information and to register, go to stateoftheppl.com and join us as we build a new nation where every voice matters.
Hi, I'm LA City Councilman Curran Price, inviting you to join us on Saturday, June the 14th from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. as we cut the ribbon on the brand new Enel Woods Park at 8703 South McKinley Avenue. Thanks to a generous donation from Heal the Bay, the park features smart irrigation, stormwater capture systems, and space for local wildlife to thrive. And we've built a walking trail, picnic areas, native landscaping, and quiet spaces for families to gather, relax, and connect. This is part of a much larger effort to expand green spaces across South LA with 3 new parks in the works, a first-of-its-kind community center coming soon, and plans to connect it all through the South LA Greenway. So mark your calendar for Saturday, June 14th, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., and come celebrate a greener, stronger South LA at Enel Woods Park. I'm also pleased to sponsor the Climate Justice Plus Black Health Symposium, moderated by Tavis Smiley, live on C-SPAN, Wednesday, June the 18th, from 4 to 7 p.m. at the Nate Holden Performing Arts Center. Just a reminder to sign up right away at the KBLA1580.com website to join me, Mayor Karen Bass, Congresswoman Sidney Kamala Dove, Tennessee State Representative Justin Pearson, Dr. Cornel West, former Congressman Jesse Jackson Jr., the Sierra Club's Ben Jealous, and other Black influencers in the climate and health fields, as we continue to amplify the connection between climate and poor health outcomes for our people. Thank you for listening. I'm Councilman Curran Price.
Lena Bloom for the Bail Project.
Imagine you're stuck in a jail cell and you can't afford bail and someone offers you a way out. Just plead guilty and you can go home and kiss your kids goodnight. What do? What thousands have. You plead guilty whether you are or not. Cash bail makes poverty a crime. That's why the Bail Project helps those who can't afford it while fighting to end cash bail. Because freedom should be free.
Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Let's get back to more of the Black Pack with Adrianne Shropshire right now on KBLA Talk 1580.
You are listening to the Black Pack, and we are here with Dr. Melina Abdullah, reflecting on the last 5 years since the murder of George Floyd. I want to talk a little bit about the work going forward. I mean, we find ourselves in a moment where, we are seeing all kinds of backlash against Black political power, right, against Black self-determination. We are kind of in an era where we hear, terms like neo-segregation, resurgence of American fascism and white supremacy. When we do polling, one of the things that we always ask folks is what's the greatest, the single greatest threat to the Black community. And, in years lately, right, always one of the top three concerns is the rise of white supremacy. And so I just, as we think about the work that needs to be done as you all think about both with Black Lives Matter Grassroots and Black Lives Matter LA, how are you all thinking about the ways in which you all need to do things differently? You talked a little bit about the important, taking stock of what we all did right, and the things that we need to hold on to carry forward, and things that folks innovated, right? And I think that that's important to also acknowledge that folks were doing things that had not been done before, to both make sure that we were, staying connected, communicating within communities, et cetera. But what does the work look like going forward for you all?
So I think it looks like a lot of things, that we have to be willing to fight on many different fronts. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I'm most, again, encouraged by in Black Lives Matter Grassroots is our consistency and constancy. So one of the things that we do is we constantly protest police associations that are not labor unions. So the End Police Associations protests that we've been engaging in for 4.5 years to really sideline police associations, to keep them out of the labor union, to expose them for who they are is really, really important. The showing up and making demands around budgets, so the people's budget work, is really, really important. And also the willingness to both move policy and be in the streets. So Black Lives Matter Grassroots is moving policies on the federal level. We have something called Waukesha's Law, which is written in the name of Waukesha Wilson, a Black mother who was killed inside LAPD Metro Detention Center in 2016. That's been introduced in Congress by Sidney Kamlager. And it's also been introduced on the state level by Isaac Bryan. So we're moving policy like that. We're moving policy like ending qualified immunity with Ayanna Pressley. And at the same time, we know that policies are reforms on a system that is fundamentally unjust. And so the only way we're going to get to abolition is to also organize in the streets. And so being there, not being afraid, not being so tethered to, I think that this is some of kind of a tension that we see right now where people say, well, where are Black people? Where I think what you're starting to see is Black disillusionment with a two-party system and a false alleged democracy that actually stifles Black progress. And so I think you don't see Black people as, head over heels in love with the Democratic Party.
I do think that there's this question around, there's always a question around, the Democratic Party, and we're certainly seeing that a lot. We've done a series of focus groups over, 2 or 3 months around the country. And that was one of the things that that constantly comes up is people's disillusionment with the party, people feeling disconnected, people being uncertain what it even stands for, people being, I think in this moment in particular, concerned that it isn't a party that is going to stand up and fight. People having a recognition that in the past there was a lot of, there was the Democratic Party fought for things that are priority concerns for Black folks, but it doesn't seem to be the case anymore. And so when you all are talking to folks about what it means to engage in electoral politics, how are you talking to them about both about the party, about what it means to build Black political power, and the ways in which the options that we have in terms of exercising that power?
Right. Well, I was really fortunate and humbled and blessed and honored to run as vice presidential candidate alongside Dr. Cornel West. Mm-hmm. And for me, what that was and what it cemented and what it helped me to really flesh out is that the Democratic Party is never going to really advocate for Black freedom, because the Democratic Party is one of two parties that are wholly corporate owned. And so Black freedom doesn't come under predatory capitalism. And both Republicans and Democrats are tethered to a predatory capitalist system, to a white supremacist capitalist system. And so I think that what we're seeing is a willingness for Black people to say, well, what are my options? I don't want to not vote, right? I don't want to not engage in this political tool. I don't want to only protest, but how do we build, right? And so I think that that's what I got to experience and engage in over the last year and a half as we ran as independents. But also I'm seeing that continue, that trends continue among Black people, recognizing that the Democratic Party, even I mentioned reparations, the way in which even the California Legislative Black Caucus really sold out the masses of Black people by not passing real reparations when they had a chance, or at least trying. And so I think that what we do in Black Lives Matter grassroots is push where we can, and use every tool in our toolbox, but also recognize that the system is not going to give it to us unless it's forced to. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that there is when we think about the breadth of conversation, both that we're having, but that we need to be having, right, in our communities, it really does include, sort of broad political analysis, certainly, but also just sort of understanding how we build power, how we exercise power, and the different ways, the different places, different fronts, right? As I think, as you said, that we can operate on. What inspires you and keeps you pushing forward?
When we fight, we win. It's not just a chant. When we fight, we win. Yeah. And the only way we lose is to retreat. Don't retreat. Look at these kids. These kids ain't scared of nothing. How are their parents' generation going to be scared, right? So pick up the courage from them and then join an organization, because we get strength from our comrades. So we invite everybody to join us in Black Lives Matter Grassroots, which is BLM Grassroots on all social media, and that's also our website, blmgrassroots.org. But if that's not for you, join some organization, because we do get strength and courage and vision from each other.
Be in community, I think, is the message that we've been trying to push. Find your community and get there. Melina, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Amber Payton with BIN News Now. President Trump is launching a probe into former President Biden's final actions in office, questioning his cognitive state and use of the auto pen.
So in my view, we need to just go ahead and subpoena them. Let's not play games.
Black Florida Rep Byron Donald says Congress should subpoena former Biden officials over its use, calling it a serious concern. Just days after debating him,